Cherry Audio recently released the VM2500 module set for Voltage Modular, and I got the whole set because while I always wanted an ARP 2500 modular system to fill up my living room when I was a lad, unfortunately I never had the $20,000 or $30,000 necessary to acquire one. So I was pretty psyched when Cherry Audio released these not too long ago, so I've given them a spin for a little bit. I've made a few patches, and I wanted to run through a allegedly quick demo so you could see what these modules are like. Let me zoom in slightly, or greatly, as the case may be. This is a base patch that I made. Basically, I just wanted to make sure that the thing worked. So I have a MIDI input coming from the outside world. I have an envelope generator, and I'm only using the left-hand side. This is a dual envelope generator. So you can see I'm getting, I'm getting the gate out of the MIDI module, and I'm sending that envelope out to a VCA. I have the triple VCA, but I'm only using one channel for now. This is the oscillator. I'm getting 1 volt per octave from the MIDI module. And this particular one, there are several, I think 3 of them, maybe P, T, and S. I'm not 100% sure. This is the P version. I'm just totally random guessing, but I think the P refers to the pots here, although that could be totally wrong. I honestly have no idea. Anyway, the 3 different modules are very similar. Basically, the only difference is what's going on in this center section. The P version has rotary pots, and as you can see, I have the ramp wave turned up 100%, and the other 4 are down to 0. These are positive and negative, so 0 is straight up. So sine wave, this is a triangle, I have a square, I'm using the ramp, and I have a pulse wave available also. And you can take the individual outs for the various waves, meaning you can have more than one at a time, or you can take the summed output, which is what I did, and that is being sent into the input of the VCA, and that goes up to the main out, which is going to the outside world. So not a spectacularly interesting patch, but I did this first just so I could make sure the thing would make noise, which it does. So I call this a win. So let us go back to 100%, and let's take a look at the next one. I made an actual patch based on the base patch. Here it is. As you can see, this is an actual patch, not just a demo patch. Again, let's zoom in. There we go. Starts out the same, have the MIDI input, the single envelope generator that I'm using. Whoops, I lied. I'm using both of them. I forgot. So the left-hand one is going to the VCA input, and the second one is going to a filter, but I'll get to that in a little bit. I've got 1 oscillator, and now I've added a second. I was mentioning the oscillators. Let me go through this while I'm at it. The P1 has knobs for volume control, negative and positive. It's amount of the wave shape. It's not technically volume, but because there's different positive and negative waves. Anyway, not going to get into that. There's another module that has switches, so you can just turn on the wave shape to the output, so it's not a knob giving you control of the amount. It's just on or off. And the third one, don't remember off the top of my head, but I can look that up and I can show you. Anyway, I have first oscillator, second oscillator, set up basically the same, slight detuning. And I have a mixer now, so output of the two oscillators coming into the mixer. And you can, again, I love having modular systems because you can take the individual channels of the mixer, or you can take the summed output, which is what I'm doing, going into the single VCA. The VCA is going into the filter, and the filter is, I'm using the notch output, but there are various other ones, going into a reverb unit, and that's going up to a left and right output. This patch is all VM2500 modules. I like this because it's pure 2500 with nothing else. And my goal was to have all and only 2500 modules in each of these patches, but as you'll see as we get a little further, I wasn't quite able to stick to that. I mean, I could have, but there were just things that were either nice to do or were just the same thing, but a heck of a lot easier if I used a few other things. Anyway, let's take a quick look at this filter module because I happen to really like it. Let's zoom in on this a little. Here's the filter. I have the notch. I love the sounds of that. But there are other outputs available. This is band pass. I'm playing with the filter cutoff, and as you can see, I cranked the resonance now, so it's starting to go a little crazy, which I love. And then that's reverberating too. Really nice sound. This is high pass. And low pass. More typical. Go back to notch. And the beauty of modular, of course, is everything is modulatable. So right now I'm having the frequency of the cutoff frequency, being controlled by the envelope, but you can mix and match them, and you can have 6 inputs without using a mult in voltage modular. So you can have all kinds of different things controlling the cutoff frequency. Same, and you have a second one, so you can have 2 different ones. So the top one can control positively. This is 33%. Or you could have the second one subtracting. You can set that to negative. So you can have all kinds of motion to the cutoff frequency. And you can also use control voltages on the resonance as well. So very flexible, all kinds of things you can do. You can also have it follow the keyboard inversely, standard, partially, whatever you like. So there's a lot going on, or a lot of potential available, even though this is just a basic patch, but it still sounds pretty darn good. Let's move on to another patch now. This time we're getting rid of the keyboards. Okay, this is, I'm going to call this a pure 2500 patch. I've used only one external non-VM2500 module, and that is this input mixer, because uh, I could have done this 100 different ways, but I still consider this more or less a pure VM2500 demo. This is only taking the inputs of the two VCAs, and the reason I did this is because it's a lot easier to turn things on or off with a mixer, because you can do that with the control voltages, but just like I mentioned earlier, it goes from minus to positive, so just turning it off to 0 is actually a little bit of work that this is just easier. So it's a tiny bit of a cheat, but I'm okay with that. Anyway, let's take a look at this. This is a self-playing sequencer patch, and I'm going to turn off the second chain and pretend it doesn't exist for now. Let's, a little too far, hang on. Got a little carried away there. So let's take a look at this. I'm using the sequential control module. That's a big name for a sequencer. And what I'm doing is I'm using its internal clock. I'm sending the clock to trigger the envelope. I've got one envelope, and that envelope is being sent, you can see it to the bottom, to this VCA here. And that's coming from, I have an oscillator here, same as before, going into a filter, and I've got two other oscillators which I'm going to ignore for now. Those I've set to be LFOs. So let us start this. I've made assigned 3 buttons. Let's turn the sequence on. And right now you can see it's sequencing through the 10 notes. You don't have to use all 10. You can use any number you want. These guys here, if I take, let's say I want to use only 4 steps, I can say restart. Whoops, that's not it. There we go. Let's put it in the reset. So now it goes through the first 4 steps, and then it sends a reset, and that goes back up to step 1. Or I can go to 6 steps. But let's get rid of that, and I'm going to use all 10 steps. The sequencer has 3 chains. I'm only using 1, and I have quantize on, so that's, I'm using this to go to the input, pointed at the screen with my finger instead of the mouse. Goes to the 1 volt per octave input of the oscillator. There's a second chain and a third chain. You can do completely independent things with each of these chains, and there's all kinds of flexible routings you could do. So I could send this chain to the filter and have every note have a different filter setting, or whatever, anything. You could send it to the attack of the envelope generator, and if you have a voltage controlled envelope generator, you can have all different attack times based on this chain. Or you could change the pulse width modulation on each step. Totally flexible as to what you could do. Possibilities are endless. Anyway, I'm just using it to trigger the to send notes from this chain to this oscillator. And from there, pretty standard, still using the ramp wave, going to the filter, which I'm using a a more standard low pass, although it doesn't really matter for this demo, just a simple one. And what I have here are two more LFOs, two more oscillators, exactly the same, except what I've done is I've set the range to low, and I've taken the output and I'm using the sine output instead of the anything else, although again you're totally free to use whatever you would like. So that is modulating the frequency, the cutoff frequency of the filter, and the second oscillator set to low frequency range is modulating the resonance. So let's crank this a little bit. Now it's a lot more pronounced. I was going for subtle before. And there's more pronounced emphasis on the modulation. But one of the cool things about voltage modular is you can have labels. So you just right click, add a label, and there you go. And I love it. It's old school 1970s. Whoops, didn't want to do that. I just wanted to get rid of the label, but I deleted the whole module by mistake. It's old school Dymo vinyl or plastic, actually, labeling tape. I love that they use that for this. It gives it a tiny bit of authenticity somehow. And you can see here that it's sliced at an angle like some of the cutters did back in the day. You youngsters will have no idea what I'm talking about, but the geezers in the audience will know exactly what I'm talking about. Anyway, that is the first row. Let's take a look at the second row. Exactly the same. Well, not exactly the same, but very similar. I only have one LFO here in this row. And what I've done is there's a link out, and this is a bit of a kludge because the link out is not meant to go to another sequencer module. There are several modules in the VM2500 series that have link in ports. Anyway, what I've done is I sort of cheated a little here and did something that was not maybe how it's intended to be used. Again, that's the beauty of modular. What I did is I took the link out and I sent to the reset, and I sent to the restart as well. So the other thing I've done is I've set the rate to half that of the first sequencer. So what's going on is this one goes to 10 steps, and when it's done through this link out, it sends a restart to the second sequencer. But because it's going at half the speed, essentially what I've done is after the fifth step, it's getting the reset from the first sequencer and going back up to the top. So the first sequencer is 10 steps and the second sequencer is 5 steps. And let me turn up the volume on that second row. It's not, I mean, it's kind of a kludge. Maybe it's intended to work that way. Honestly, I can't tell you right now which way that went, but it does work, and it took a little figuring out to figure it out. But I wanted to keep this clean and pure, so it would be 100% VM2500 modules, except for the mixer. Although the mixer is totally optional, I could have just turned down the VCA, and actually that's why I was thinking I should have used the modules with switches, because I could have just flipped the switch here and turned off the output and not used this mixer. But I think you get the idea. Some of these guys, let me turn the sequence off, and if you notice, this one is accidentally for sequencer 1 at step 1, but this has not reset, so I put in a reset button which sends a pulse to both resets, and now you can see they're both okay, I've stopped it now. This one is at step 5, this one is at step 2. Hit the reset button, and now you can see they're both reset to step 1, and I can hit the sequence on and it will go. One thing with this setup that I was not debating whether I should mention it, but I could have glossed over it, is that the sequence off, reset, because of the way this thing's set up, when you turn this on, the second sequencer doesn't fire until the first one is already playing. It doesn't matter at all, but they're not really synchronized, and that bummed me out a little. So not a big deal, but truth in advertising. So that is the pure dual sequencer patch. And now let's move on to a slightly less pure version. Okay, now we are on the big one. This is not pure as the driven snow like the first one was. I still have the mixer, but the non-synchronized starting of the other version of this, I gave in and I used clocks and dividers so that everything is perfectly synchronized. You can see up here I have a run stop now, and I still have the reset, but I don't have the start and stop. It's not really a run stop button, but what it's doing is right now the clock is muted, which means it's not sending out clocks, even though it's still running. So when I press the run stop button, it unmutes the clocks and everything goes. I have my mixer cheat again, so we're only going to hear the first row. And that's delightful. You can see the second row is running, and the third row is running too. I have the clock at a speed. It's pretty fast. I had to rejigger things because I added the third row and I wasn't slick enough to think about it in advance. The third row you can see is really running through the 10 steps. So I have that at divide by 1, so it's at the speed of the clock. The first row is half that speed, and you can see that the middle row is a quarter of that speed. So let's turn up the middle row. And this is what I mean by it being cleaner, if not as pure. I mentioned earlier that you can use these gates to reset the sequencer, and that's what I've done. So I have 10 steps in the first sequencer, and what I've done is I have 5 steps in this one, and then I send a reset so it goes back up to the top, the first step. Now let me kick in this third row. Whoops, this one. So that's going at double speed in a sense, although I could have used a multiplier and multiplied the clock speed here by 2, so I can have this clock set to 1 and this one set, this divider set to 1 and this divider set to 2. But this is how I set it up, and it works, same difference, no big deal. So that is this patch. I have a triple sequence, and there's really no limit to what you can do. I just went very straightforward, but you can use 100, you can have a fourth row of 8 different LFOs, slowly changing things as you go. You can have many more sequencers doing all kinds of things. You can have random voltages doing weird things all over. This is pretty basic, but I just wanted to test out the sequencers and give a demo of the VM2500 module set. So let's go to my last patch. I'll stop this one. So this clock's doing a lot of work. It's gating the envelope, which is kind of a standard thing. And I wanted to have random notes play by themselves. So what I've done is I've taken the gate and I have a sample and hold. So the gate is clocking the sample and hold, and it's also triggering samples. And then what I've done is I've taken the sample and hold output and sent that to a quantizer, and it's not really C major. I picked these 4 notes, so the sample and hold output is pretty random, but each clock pulse sends another voltage into the quantizer, and the quantizer is saying, okay, I'm going to pick the closest voltage to one of these 4. What I've done, though, is I've controlled the input amount, so it's essentially limited to 1 octave, more or less, and you can change keys, quote-unquote. Right now, it's the bass key, but you can go up 24 steps or 2 octaves or down 24. The output of the quantizer goes up to the 2 oscillators up at the top and tells them what notes to play. Pretty standard. So let's hit that run stop button. So this is totally being played with the notes chosen by the sample and hold, being controlled by the quantizer. And what you can do is, I have the input amount set to 0.25. Let's double that to 0.5. And that adds an octave. And that's possibly 2 octaves. But let's go back down. I want to just have a few notes, not a lot. And the input offset, now I'm up 5 steps. Now I'm up an octave, up 2 octaves. So you can see that you have control of what notes are going. So I really love this because it's just playing randomly, but it's not random, it's being quantized, so you can play specific notes. You can change the notes. There we go. I like this because it's spare. It's only the 4 notes to choose from. And it's a little off. It's not like a standard calm scale. There's a lot of things you can do. As you can see, I have a further ideas notepad. You can use the second sample and hold at a quarter speed and then use a different quantizer to go here to control the offset. So essentially every 4th note or every 8 notes, if that's what you consider a bar, you can have it pick a new offset, so you're essentially changing keys every 2 or 4 bars, or however slow you clock that key change. There's just an unlimited number of things you can do. So these are all self-playing and no human intervention. can duplicate this and have it do higher speed and add more notes and basically have the voltage modular playing its own self-running compositions, if you'd like. But I just wanted to show what was possible. Not necessarily limited to the VM2500 module set. You can do these things with any modules set up in a similar way, but I just love the oscillators. You know, they're cool, but I just love the filter because and actually, to be fair, I don't even have a filter in this one, but I love how the filter sounds. You can have the 4 different filter types, and you can mix and match them, and that sort of thing just makes me happy. Anyway, let me zoom back out. So these are my initial VM2500 module set patches.